All right, where we left off, we were taking our creature to the beauty parlor, and we're taking care of all those little flyaway edges, smoothing everything down, and trimming out the outside, mostly with the lasso and a 1-pixel feather. You can see how this is pretty trimmed, but not all the way, and we move from the top on down with whatever's visible. So now I go in with my lasso at 1-pixel feather, and I keep finding that edge. I'm going to trim away the little whiskers, but I like this one, so I'm going to trim around it. And then delete, delete, delete. That will soften it. Okay, now, what's behind that? This edge. So I'm going to start trimming this the same way, going just inside the line because it is organic. Feathers are an interesting texture. Like fur, like passes through them a little bit. They're not 100% opaque. They're somewhat translucent, so that feather kind of helps that light to come through and soften that edge. But you don't want a heavy feather because you don't want it to actually be transparent at the edge, because that will just look too soft. And that's why I don't use my eraser for the outside edges, because it's too easy to ghost and cut into it too much with the eraser. But with the feather turned on with your lasso, you can get pretty tight control of the edge you want to draw and how soft or how sharp it is. Okay, that's one side. Good. And I can just, these are feathers that are coming from this layer. I can decide if I use them, how I use them, but they're not going to stay there. And now I'm going to work on this side. And remember, the reason we have all the layers on and we work from the front to the back is there's no reason for me to trim edges that are covered up by other assets. And I might reveal things that are in other assets that need to be trimmed. But right now I'm just worried about the internal edges of the head here. Okay, now let's put it all together. So these feathers, let's kind of move them around. Again, internal compositing, I can take this whole chunk of stuff from that layer and move it and decide what's going to be more useful, maybe like right there. I can even Command T, transform it. I can even warp it, even though it's just a selection rather than the whole layer. And I can make it kind of fit with my character's silhouette to soften it a little bit. I'm not really clear on where these feathers are coming from in the design. So another option is to internally composite this way. And this works great with organic textures like grass or feathers or fur. So I'm going to duplicate Command J and then move that up, Command right bracket. And then trim away. And now I have internal edges to play with. Trim all that away, delete, delete, delete. And now I can say, okay, soft-edged eraser. Start with 100% opacity. Blend away the hard edges. Hit Command D if you're not immediately getting results. That means there's a selection still active somewhere. So this is helping me blend away. I can reveal some spikes in front of the feathers, but also have these feathers kind of coming behind. So first at 100% opacity, get rid of the hard edges. See, you're kind of creating your own illusion there. And this will help with those spikes, which weren't always in the best focus anyway. And now a lower opacity. Just so those color hits kind of help. And then the last thing is I'm going to use, on just this duplicate, I'm going to use my magic wand with contiguous turned off, grab all the empty space around it, and then select and mask to soften those edges. More and more and more and more and more. All right. So now I've shown kind of a transition from the quills into the feathers. Now I can do that same thing for the back of the head. I go back here, and I have to do that just for this section, right? Which just does not look believable yet. And that's the thing about digital art, is it needs to look clean and believable everywhere, not just in the focal points. Otherwise, it kind of gives itself away. So you're looking for how to improve the weakest aspects of it. With that 1 pixel feather, trim this down, 1 pixel feather. This is just free floating, so I'm going to move it, select it, then use the move tool. Just bring it in like that. And remember, I can always internally composite all of this. Command T, warp it, kind of shift it to do more what I want. I don't like how those feathers are pointing out. I haven't used that analogy before, but it is kind of like finishing off a hairdo. Okay, now I got to work on the edge in front of it, right here, and trim that out a little bit. So that looks more believable. And then go in with my eraser, first at 100% opacity. Get rid of that hard edge. And then at lower opacities to blend it in. Now I'm going to need some dodging and burning there for that transition, but that comes later. All right, anything else? Any kind of debris that's floating around, like this, I don't need. I delete. And that gray will help show it to you. Let's see, where's that coming from, that edge? I know it's a lot of layers, that's why it helps to organize them into different folders. There it is. So I also want to trim this away. Just coming all the way from the back. And then, since I copied it up here, it's also coming from there. And I want to trim that away. All right, that'll do it. We're not going for perfection, right? Doing our best. Okay, now the body. So if I've got the head all finished, it's all clean. Well, there's one more thing. Sorry, the transition of these feathers. Yeah, I'll do that with the body. Okay, so I'm going to turn off the head. I'm going to save my work. And now I got to clean up the body. Now, before I start blending or doing anything else fancy, I really need to adjust the lights and darks, right? So the first thing is going to be what's on the top of the body. They're going to be the legs. They're on top of everything. So I'm going to start with those. And I'm going to go to Image, Adjustment, Levels. Play with the midtones. Do they go brighter? Do they go darker? I think they can go a little bit darker. Limit the highlights a little bit, especially because they're underneath the body, so they're in shadow. But not going to black. Then I go to color balance. They're very warm, so I'm going to push the midtones towards the cyan, a little bit towards the blue, maybe even a touch towards the green. I'm going to push the shadows towards the blue and the cyan. It's working, and now the highlights are going to bring back that yellow, at least in the legs. Again, you can see it with your history. That's what levels did. That's what color balance did. The first steps can be pretty major ones. And then hue saturation. What spectrum do I want? Maybe I want to push just a little bit this way. Do I want to saturate it? Nope. I want to desaturate it just a little bit. Okay, next. Move on to the belly here. Start with levels. Even though they're very different colors, very different types of feathers, this will help me to get them to match. I'll limit the highlights, darken it, go to color balance, and even though they're gray feathers, there's a lot of color in there. You just got to play with the sliders, figure out what it needs. Look a little bit closer to what those legs are. This takes practice, kind of training your eye. And squinting also helps, kind of matching shadow values. Yeah, I think that will work. And now hue saturation. Big spectrum shifts. And then saturation. For this, I'm actually want to increase the saturation a little bit. And again, I can see the difference. That's without anything. It's with levels. That's with color balance. So with hue saturation, I'm actually going to go back to levels because I think I can brighten it a little bit now. And brighten those midtones. Yeah, okay. Now what's underneath that? We got the chicken head. I'm just going to do a quick Command T and a quick warp to tuck that eyeball back in. I can also just composite over the eyeball, but I just want this kind of puffy tail. All right. I'm going to play with its adjustments, levels. Go a little bit darker. Limit the highlights. It's a really puffy tail. Don't want it too bright. Color balance. It's very yellow. So let's deaden that a little bit.